I'm speaking to Leith Van Onselen, the unconventional economist, and we've been talking about Australia, the lucky country, and what we're really doing to that and whether we're maintaining our luck, our good luck. Leith, one of the pieces of news in the last week has been the announcement as to how the GST has been broken up. Now, you're probably too young to remember the introduction of the GST, but I do. And it was to replace...
No, I remember. I was working.
Oh, good.
Yes, I was working. I'm 46, so I still remember it.
Good. And you remember it was to replace the existing state taxes. But they seem to have introduced, when they brought it in, they seem to have introduced some sort of a socialist element, because I would have thought if it's going to replace state taxes, each state would get what was collected in their state. But decisions are made to spread it in different ways among the states. So New South Wales has just lost some money. Western Australia has a guarantee, and Victoria has done very well in the latest round. And as I understand it, the whole idea is that each state be able to provide the same services that other states provide. What do you think of the way in which we break up the GST in Australia?
Yeah, look, I've got mixed feelings about it. So for starters, it can be unfair. So I actually, if I have to feel sorry for a state at the moment, it's probably New South Wales, which did see its allocation shrink. And obviously Victoria's a basket case. Right, so Victoria's swimming in massive amounts of debt. It's got a very competent government that's basically just wasted a ton of money on bureaucrats. So Victoria's had the biggest increase in public service bureaucrats in the past 15 years, according to the AEDT, and also the biggest blowout in public sector wages. And look, that you could argue that it's fine to increase your public service if you end up getting better public services. That Victoria lags on just about every component there. So we have less hospital beds per 1,000 than any other state, for example. So our services are not improving, yet the government is blowing heaps of money on that sort of stuff. And I've got no problem spending money on frontline public servants like nurses and teachers and police officers, etc. But I do have issues when you basically employ a whole bunch of back office bureaucrats who, quite frankly, most of them aren't needed. You can just make the system run more efficiently. And also they've got a lot of high paid fat cats who get paid a lot of money to, let's be frank, not do a whole lot. So there's that issue. Also, the Victorian government has blown copious amounts of money on white elephant infrastructure projects, which has just blown massive hole in the budget. So, I feel sorry for New South Wales, because New South Wales basically had their allocation cut back, and Victoria's been the big winner because it's so incompetent. The federal government's effectively bailed it out to a degree, and offered give it an extra $3.5 billion.
So they're being rewarded. They're being rewarded for bad government.
Yes. Now the flip side of that, though, David, is we also know that the federal government's running a huge immigration program, right? So
yes.
You import Australia's population grew by 680,000 last calendar year, according to the national accounts. And the majority of that population has gone to Victoria, number one, and number two, New South Wales. So Victoria's gotten the most, New South Wales gotten the second most, but there's not much difference between them. They both got the huge amounts. So Victoria about 180,000 last financial year, and New South Wales got about 170,000.
Is the reason for that, Leith, geographic, that Sydney has more limits on its spread than Melbourne? Melbourne's a flat city, and they can spread much further than we can.
Yeah, basically. So there's two factors there. So net overseas international migrants tend to go to Sydney and Melbourne. Sydney first, Melbourne second. So, but almost the same. So Sydney gets the most, Melbourne gets the second most, but there's not much difference. The big difference between the population is that people leave Sydney more than they leave Melbourne because the cost of housing is so expensive. So Sydney bleeds local residents. So it put some numbers around that. New South Wales' population last financial year, so we're talking 2022, 2023, grew by 174,000. Net overseas migration was 176,000. So Sydney lost net 2,000 people. Now, the number that left was actually a lot more than that because there's obviously births. So population went up by births, but there was more people left than there was births. In Melbourne, in Victoria's net overseas migration, I don't have the number to hand, but net overseas migration was slightly less than New South Wales, but we got more natural increase through births and also, some people coming from interstate, not many. But now, to get back to the GST issue, if the federal government is going to fire hose in unbelievable numbers of people into basically Sydney and Melbourne, which is what it's doing, because the majority come to Sydney and Melbourne, the federal government should have to pay for that, in my view, because the way the tax revenue in Australia is distributed, 82% of it goes to the federal government and only 18% of it goes to state and local governments. So there's this huge imbalance. And the way the system's set up, the federal government gets all the benefit from immigration. So they get all the extra personal income tax receipts. So obviously you have more people coming in, more people working, you're going to get more income taxes. They also get more company taxes. So the federal government gets all the company taxes and company taxes go up with immigration as well, because outfits like Harvey Norman, et cetera, make more sales because more people, and they make more profits. Problem is the cost of immigration falls on the state governments, because states governments have got to provide the infrastructure, they've got to provide the social housing, they've got to provide the government services, et cetera. So because of that, I think the federal government should have to compensate Victoria and New South Wales for this immigration, because if they're going to bring it in, they have to provide the funding. The problem with it is, though, why is New South Wales getting this allocation cut? And why is Victoria getting so much more when both of them are getting hammered to basically the same degree by net overseas migration? So I think if there's any state that can complain, it's New South Wales. Victoria's been lucky, but overall in the macro sense, both states should be demanding the funds from the federal government, because if they're going to fire hose in migrants, the federal government needs to pay up. Because at the moment, the incentives are unaligned, because the incentives are for the federal government to keep ramping immigration as it gets the benefits and it doesn't bear the costs. We need to make it so it bears the costs as well. And only when it does that, will it think twice about immigration.
And Leith, you point to something extraordinary, and that is that the Commonwealth, this federal government, gets 80% of the taxes. That doesn't happen in any other federation in the world, does it?
No, it didn't happen until the Second World War. So back in before the Second World War hit, basically the state government had their own income taxes. And then when the Second World War hit, basically everyone agreed, because we needed a national effort for the war, that income tax collection would be centralised in the federal government. Problem with it is it's created this vertical fiscal imbalance where the federal government basically, as I said, collects all the tax revenue, but the states are primarily responsible for service delivery and social housing and infrastructure and that sort of thing. So that basically means that the states are always underfunded. And the way they've gotten around it for the last, 30 years really is to privatise everything. They sold off all the assets. And, to try and keep up this population growth, they also try and get some back through GST and through, through other federal government allocations, when they try and get some money for infrastructure projects, etc. Problem is, though, the imbalance is still there, and this imbalance, unfortunately, encourages this big Australian population growth, because the feds collect all the benefits through company and personal taxes, and they don't bear the costs. And until those two things are aligned, you're going to end up policy failures everywhere, not just with immigration, but also with, there's going to be buck passing and blame shifting on hospitals and schools, on everything. And you always see it. The feds try and blame the states try and blame the feds. And us in the middle as taxpayers, we don't care if the tax is going to the feds or the states, we're still paying it either way. We just want them to sort it out and to run efficiently and do their job.
And finally,
the system that we have doesn't lose.
And finally, doesn't a federation work better if we have competitive federalism, where the states decide on their own policies? They're not lent on by the Commonwealth to adopt some uniform policy. And you see, for example, better schools in one state than another state, and the states that are delinquent are forced to imitate the state which is performing well.
Yeah, and because that again, Dave, is why I'm a bit I have mixed feelings about this whole GST thing. As I said, the feds should be paying more for the immigration that they're putting on states. At the same time, you don't like to see inefficient actors and, wasteful actors who, like Victoria, are getting rewarded to a degree through their GST allocation. So, and same time, if you take energy, if we circle back to energy, we've got one state, WA, which was smart enough to bring in the reservation policy, which has delivered cheap gas and electricity prices for their residents, acting, efficiently and also in the interest of their constituents.
And using the comparative advantage that Western Australia had. Seems to be so logical.
That's right. But also doing it in a way that doesn't disadvantage their residents, it actually advantages them. Whereas we haven't done that on the East Coast. So part of that is failure on the East Coast.
Well, Leith, thank you once again for bringing us your wisdom of an unconventional economist. Leith Van Onselen, you're a most welcome guest on this program. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Speak to you next time.
Good. Thank you.